Hey guys, so here is the long-awaited Piccolo review video. If you are new here and you have never seen one of my Flute Center of New York sponsored posts, here are a few things you need to know. The Flute Center of New York has given me a code, JAF, which will give you guys a whole bunch of perks. If you guys order a flute straight off of their website, or if you ask them for a trial via email or phone, and you use my code, JAF, you will get 1. Free domestic shipping within the US, 2. An extended 10-day trial, 3. You will get an extended 18th-month warranty on your new instrument, and number 4, you can take up to 3 instruments out for a trial at a time. And just to be transparent, if you order an instrument using my code, I will earn a commission on that instrument. Win-win for everyone. When trying instruments, remember to take off all jewelry and anything that can get caught in the instrument. Whenever you're taking an instrument out on trial, never use the cleaning rod, the swabbing cloth, or the polishing cloth. In the case of these piccolos, some of them actually have a tube of cork grease that comes with them. Do not use them. And just a quick disclaimer, every flutist plays each flute or piccolo differently. I'll just be giving you my thoughts on which instruments will tend to work better on which kind of musician. And without further ado, let's get right into the review. So today we are reviewing the Jupiter 1100 and the Yamaha 62. Before I forget, I am going to read you guys all the specs. We're looking at the Jupiter Piccolo 1100. Select Grenadilla wood head joint. Select Grenadilla wood body, silver plated mechanism, conical bore, split E. So now the Yamaha Piccolo 62, Grenadilla wood head joint and body, silver plated keys, split E mechanism, conical bore. Yes, they pretty much have the exact same specs, but they are slightly different, and that's what we're going to talk about in this video. Alright, so first off, I wanted to draw your attention to the case. The Jupiter case has a single latch. I actually found it kind of awkward in the beginning to open this, but I realized that you kind of have to hold it both top and bottom and then kind of slide it out. I have never seen a single latch case before. The Yamaha case is your typical double latch. You may notice that the Jupiter case is quite a bit smaller actually than the Yamaha case. You'll see that Jupiter actually has their own branded cork grease, and they actually put a spot in your case for it. If you look in the Yamaha case, they have both a spot for a tube of cork grease, the type that looks like a lip balm. Don't use it as a lip balm, by the way. And they actually have another spot that's like more the circular pan. The other thing that I noticed, the Yamaha case, they actually have a little insert for your cleaning rod, and they give you a metal one, which is not going to be a problem because it's not going to scratch your piccolo because your piccolo is wooden. At least the Jupiter that came out on trial for me, for some reason it didn't come with a cleaning rod, but I do see a groove right down here to put the cleaning rod in. I guess you would just need to ask the Flute Center of New York to put a cleaning rod in there for you. When you look at the piccolo inside the case, the Jupiter one does not have a plastic cover for the cork area of the neck. That is pretty typical, but I noticed the Yamaha one has a plastic cover for it, so it just is sort of like an added protection when you put your piccolo away. The other interesting difference that I see is there is quite a bit more cork, about a third more on the Jupiter than on the Yamaha. The Yamaha lip hole is a lot more square than the Jupiter. So the Jupiter is a very oval lip hole. If you tend to have a much thinner airstream, the oval cutting will work really well for you. If you tend to blow out a very thick column of air, even for the piccolo, then the Yamaha will work out really well for you. Most piccolos are conical, and that means that it's cone shaped, which means that the diameter of the tube is actually bigger at the head joint, and it gets smaller as you go down the tube. It's actually only been in the last, I think, 200 years or so that the flute itself, which used to be a wooden conical instrument, evolved into the metal cylindrical tube. For those of you who have dabbled in both and you're not really sure why the tuning is so crazy on the piccolo, it's because it is conical shaped. It gets quite a bit wider right here, and then from that point on it gets thinner. That shape is a lot more exaggerated on the Jupiter than on the Yamaha. It would appear that the Yamaha, above the portion that gets really thick before it gets thin, I think they chose to make that part quite a bit bigger too. I noticed that I almost could not overblow the Yamaha. Like, I could push and get quite loud. It was really easy to push way too much on the Jupiter. The interesting thing is that on the Jupiter, because it is so thin, I noticed that I was able to pull back a lot more. I was able to get a teeny tiny sound and sustain it. So I guess it really depends on on what you're playing the piccolo for, right? The other thing I noticed is that on the Jupiter, the head joint is a very tight fit with the body, but it loosens up as you play it. While you play your instrument gets warm and it starts to expand a little bit. The Yamaha doesn't fit quite that tightly. One thing I forgot to mention is that the Jupiter comes with a tarnish strip. Typically, flutists don't care that much for the metal mechanism on the piccolo. I thought that was interesting. The Yamaha did not come with that. One notable thing is that both have split E mechanisms on it. I'm not sure if that is a new thing that is becoming standard. I think it is, because you have the split E mechanism. It's actually easier to tune it too, because you're not afraid that you're going to lose that E. It works really well on both piccolos. You'll notice that both of these instruments use Grenadilla wood. There's a lot of other woods that are used out there as well, but Grenadilla wood, it's like the wood instrument wood. So first, we're going to try out the tone. On the Jupiter, the low and the middle register notes are very sweet, but they don't have a ton of depth. But the trade-off you get is that it's very even. You don't have to put in a lot of effort to make every note sound like the other. The Yamaha, on the other hand, I found that the tone was a lot warmer in the lower and middle registers. However, the trade-off with this one is that the middle E flat in particular tends to sound really muffled. I'm actually wondering if Yamaha sacrificed that particular E flat so that every other note would sound beautiful, and then you just kind of have to work on that E flat until basically you can manually get it to sound like all the other notes around it. You can. I actually did it while I was trying this out. For the high notes on the Jupiter, I was able to get a really clear tone all the way up until the B flat really easily. This lip hole cut, I don't think it really fits me. So there's a huge difference in how it feels going from the B flat to the B. There's a huge jump. That B natural, I have to aim really high. I feel like I'm kind of... And I was able to get the C out too. I believe it's C8. Probably not as strong as I would have liked, especially if you are more of an oval cut player than I am. You will definitely get that B and C out. However, on the Yamaha, I was able to get all the way up to the C8, no problem. There was no difference to me between the B flat and the B natural and the C. I cannot actually get both the B and the C on my personal piccolo. I really should upgrade that thing. Because we are working with piccolo, I decided to play around with stability. And to do that, I played with octave leaps and dynamics. For the octave leaps on the Jupiter, when you lip up to the high notes feel a little bit resistant. But the tone is surprisingly consistent between the lower note and the higher note. It doesn't require a crazy amount of lipping. I call this lipping. I'm not sure if it's because the hole itself is smaller, so it requires less movement, maybe. For the octave leaps on the Yamaha, the leaps are extremely responsive. So when you lip up to that higher note, it just, boom, it comes right out. However, you do have to lip more, and I also believe it is because the hole itself is bigger. It really depends on how you play a piccolo. Also, because it is a larger hole, the Yamaha naturally plays louder. And as I said before, the dynamics on these two instruments are very, very different. The Jupiter, you can pull back like crazy, but you can't push too much. You'll end up overblowing it. I cannot sustain a tiny, tiny, tiny sound on the Yamaha. I mean, I can, but it takes a lot of effort. On the Jupiter, it almost feels like it's not much effort at all. However, you can play really loudly on this thing and not overblow it. And then I wanted to play around with the mechanism. So I did major scale, minor scale, chromatic scale, and scale in thirds. I did everything starting and ending on F because it covers a really nice range. Both mechanisms on each piccolo are really, really great. Very, very smooth. There's nothing very different about the main keys on each of these piccolos, but the trill keys are a little bit different. The Jupiter trill keys feel more sturdy. They feel a little bit more rounded. The Yamaha trill keys have a bit more of a hump. Some people like to feel more of that hump. Some people like it to be a little flatter, so it's more comfortable for their fingers. Totally up to you. I did find that the trill keys on the Yamaha feel just the slightest bit more rickety, but not enough to deter me from purchasing a Yamaha. On the Yamaha, the B-flat lever is a little higher and it's a little easier to find. But on the Jupiter, it's quite a bit flatter. It's a lot closer to the other keys, so it's a little bit harder to find. So in this case, I actually like the Yamaha one better because I can find the lever a lot more easily, but it works. Both of the B-flat levers are very, very smooth. The other thing that is really important on the piccolo is making sure that you can actually reach over to the G-sharp key and wiggle it with your right hand. There's like a couple of trills out there on the piccolo that you actually need to do that. On the Jupiter, you'll find that the G-sharp lever is raised a little bit, and I think it's so that you can find it a lot more easily. You kind of feel like you have to go down way more than you think you need to. The way I was wiggling it before, it wasn't actually opening the key all the way. So it kind of came out as like almost like a 3/4 trill. The Yamaha, on the other hand, it's not as easy to find. They did raise it a little bit too, so you can find it, but it's not raised far enough over the keys to make it feel really easy to find it. You kind of feel like you end up hitting the other keys with it too. However, it is very clear how far down you need to press. All right, and lastly, these two instruments tune a little differently. I was very genuinely surprised that the lower and middle register notes on the Jupiter Piccolo are incredibly in tune. However, when you get to the C sharp and the D are incredibly flat. You have to use alternate fingerings and you need to lift it up like there is no tomorrow. The high E flat, however, is surprisingly in tune. Usually E flats on both piccolos and flutes are like the bane of everyone's existence. But then you get to the E. Yes, you have a split E, so it's easier to hold, but I do find it's quite sharp. And then as usual, the other notes from F and above are sharp. That's just the way they are on every single piccolo. They are all sharp. On the Yamaha, we have slightly different issues. The low notes are a little finicky. However, it's a lot easier to bend your pitch on the Yamaha than it is on the Jupiter. That means it will be very easy for you to fit in with other instrumentalists. Now, here's the thing. Whereas the Jupiter got very, very flat on the C sharp and the D, the higher one. Those two notes are not as flat on the Yamaha. Depends on what you find easier to tune. The high E flat is also a little bit sharp on this one. The high E on this one is really sharp. And then for all of the notes above that, again, they're sharp. There we have it. These are these two wonderful piccolos. It really depends on the type of piccolo player you are. They both play a lot better than my current piccolo. I forgot to mention how much they cost. The Jupiter 1100 costs $1,719, and the Yamaha Piccolo 62 costs $2,272.99. The little surprise that we had in store for you guys. So Jupiter has this Silver Bells deal going on. I believe it's their Christmas promotion. If you buy some of their select instruments, the Jupiter 1100 is one of them. You can get a free flute stand or a music stand. The flute stand that they are selling is actually the newer version of the one that I currently have. I've talked about it before. It is the one with the telescoping peg. I'll put a link in the info box below. There's a form on there that you have to fill out. I think some of the Azumi instruments is also valid for this deal. But take a look at that link just so you know exactly which models qualify for this deal, and you can actually order those instruments off of the Flute Center New York and get in on this deal. I believe this deal only goes until sometime in December, so please go and check that out. I believe that is it. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Anything that the Flute Center of New York sells, let us know what you want to see from their stock. As usual, if you guys like this video, make sure you give me a big thumbs up and hit subscribe to catch new videos every Saturday. My last video is over there, and if you want to catch me during the week, my social media networks are down there. But otherwise, I will see you guys next week. Bye. You'll notice in this video, I actually forgot to take off my rings, which is a big no-no, so don't do what I just did. However, it is not so much of an issue with piccolos because piccolos tend to be made with plastic or wood. The chances of scratching your piccolo with rings that don't actually have any studs on them is actually very low, so this is not that bad.